Hello, dear viewers. Today, I have a chilling tale from Japan that I'd like to share with you. It's a story that might keep you up at night, so make sure you're comfortable and ready for a scare. Let's begin, shall we? It was in the early autumn when I first noticed it. I had been dating Mina for exactly 2 weeks at that point. That particular day, we had spent the afternoon window shopping at a suburban mall, and enjoyed a late lunch in the food court. Afterwards, we went for a leisurely drive in my car. As we drove, pleasant background music filled the car. We were enjoying casual conversation, or rather, I was doing most of the talking while Mina nodded along. You see, Mina was more of the quiet type, somewhat socially awkward. Our meeting, about a month earlier, was quite unusual. It happened one evening as I was walking home from work. As I crossed an old stone bridge, I noticed a lone figure under a streetlight. It was a woman, leaning against the railing, her head bowed. That woman was Mina. She wore a light green dress that accentuated her slender figure. Her eyes seemed vacant as she repeatedly reached into a burlap sack with her right hand and tossed something into the river below. I couldn't help but wonder, what on earth is she throwing away? Puzzled, I stopped about 2 or 3 meters away on the sidewalk. I couldn't quite make out what she was discarding, but at the time, I thought they might be gloves. There were other items too. As I stood there, pondering why she would be throwing such things into the river, Mina suddenly turned to face me. With eyes like a dead fish, she gave me a small, eerie smile. That was how our story began. Later, I learned that she had been disposing of mementos from her boyfriend, who had suddenly passed away a few days earlier. It was a strange and unsettling encounter, to say the least. As we continued our drive, the conversation in the car gradually died down, and an awkward silence fell between us. It was broken by an unexpected suggestion from Mina. If you'd like, would you want to come over to my place now? I have some delicious coffee, she said quietly. Sure, why not? I replied, trying to sound casual. But inside, I was ecstatic. You see, this would be my first time visiting her home. I knew the location of Mina's apartment from the numerous times I had dropped her off or picked her up. We arrived without much difficulty. Her apartment was in a 3-story building on the outskirts of a modest shopping district in the city center. I had seen it many times before, but looking at it now, I realized how old and run down it appeared. I parked the car in the designated space and we entered the building together. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor and walked down a dimly lit corridor. The setting sun cast an eerie glow through the windows, creating long shadows. Mina's apartment was the corner unit at the very end of the hallway. The layout was simple: a Western-style room and a Japanese-style room beyond the entrance, plus a toilet and bathroom. The Western-style room served as the living room, and it was neatly kept. I sat on the sofa by the wall while Mina prepared coffee in the kitchen. She then placed 2 cups on the glass table in front of me. For a while, we enjoyed the aromatic coffee and continued our conversation. Then, as a moment of silence fell between us, I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. What was that? Feeling a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, I slowly turned around. My eyes fell on the sliding doors, separating the living room from the adjacent Japanese-style room. I turned back to Mina and asked, "Is someone else here?" But she remained silent, her head bowed as she continued sipping her coffee. Curious and slightly unnerved, I stood up and walked to the sliding doors. I opened them slightly and peered into the room. The light from the living room spilled into the dark space, revealing a sparse 8 tatami room. There was a closet with sliding doors on the opposite wall, but other than that, the room was eerily empty. A single window with cheap, plain curtains was visible on the far left. What caught my attention, however, was a modest Persian rug, covering about 2 tatami mats worth of space beneath the window. As I was about to close the doors, something strange flickered in my peripheral vision. Suspicious, I took another look into the room. There, on the carpet, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A shadowy silhouette in the shape of a 4-legged animal seemed to be standing there, motionless. A dog? I thought, but in the blink of an eye, it vanished. Would you like something to eat? Mina's voice suddenly came from behind me, making me jump. Oh, yeah, I guess I am a bit hungry, I replied, hastily, quickly sliding the doors shut. We ate pizza together at the dining table in the living room. Afterwards, I took a quick shower. Then, Mina laid out a futon in the center of the Japanese-style room for me. Mina changed into her nightwear and removed her makeup. When she entered the room, she lay down next to me, cuddling close like a kitten. Despite my unease about the strange shadow I had seen earlier, Mina's warmth eventually lulled me into a drowsy state. I'm not sure how much time had passed when I was awakened by a faint whispering sound. I lifted my head slightly and noticed that Mina was no longer beside me. Following the sound, I saw her, crouched in the corner of the room, near the carpet. In the dim light, I could make out her back, as she seemed to be whispering to something in the corner. I strained to hear what she was saying. It's too late for you to come out now. This is all your fault, you know. Mina was speaking as if scolding a child. The soft moonlight filtering through a gap in the curtains gradually revealed more of the scene. What I saw next made my heart race. Behind Mina's back, I could see glimpses of a man's pale face appearing and disappearing. Who was that man? Something felt terribly wrong. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see more clearly, and what I saw froze the blood in my veins. The man was completely naked and standing on all fours. His body was covered in painful-looking welts. A gag was fixed in his mouth, and a chain collar was fastened around his neck. But the most horrifying detail was that where his hands and feet should have been, there were metal hooves, like those of a horse. The man gazed up at Mina, with pleading, sorrowful eyes, listening intently to her words. He looked like a little boy being scolded by his mother. After a while, Mina slowly stood up. By then, the grotesque figure behind her had vanished. She began walking towards me. I quickly lay my head back on the pillow and squeezed my eyes shut. Soon, I felt her breath on my forehead. She whispered, "You won't betray me, will you?" Confused by her cryptic words, I kept my eyes tightly closed. Before I knew it, her presence had faded away. The next day was also my day off, but I had some errands to run. I woke up around 6 a.m. and started getting ready. I could hear Mina preparing breakfast in the kitchen. As I finished changing in the Japanese-style room, my eyes fell on the modest carpet in the corner. Curiosity got the better of me, and I walked over to it. Crouching down, I slowly lifted the edge of the carpet to peek underneath. What I saw made me gasp. The tatami beneath the carpet was stained with what looked like dark, rust-colored iron. If you looked at it a certain way, the stain resembled the agonized face of a man, feeling as if I had seen something I shouldn't have. I quickly replaced the carpet. That's when I felt it again, that chilling sensation running down my spine. I spun around, my eyes landing on the closet doors. Slowly, I approached and placed my hand on the handle. Just then, Mina called out, "Breakfast is ready." I hurriedly turned away, replying, "Okay, I'll be right there," and left the room. As we ate breakfast together on the glass table in front of the sofa, I couldn't shake the images of the horrifying, deformed man from the night before and the stain on the tatami from my mind. The small TV on the side table was broadcasting the 7 a.m. local news. At around 2 a.m. this morning, two men fishing near K Pier in the northern part of S City discovered something strange floating on the surface of the water. Upon retrieving it, they found it to be a severed human wrist. The police are currently working to identify the remains, which were in an advanced state of decomposition. Isn't K Pier quite close to here? I asked, turning to look at Mina as I sipped my after-breakfast coffee. She mumbled an uninterested "I suppose so," as she stood up and began clearing the dishes. As I drove home from Mina's apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. That eerie sensation I felt in her room. The grotesque figure I saw in the Japanese-style room. His sad, pleading eyes, and the disturbing stain under the carpet. What did it all mean? The more I thought about it, the more unsettled I became. I decided I needed to visit her apartment again to investigate further. The following Sunday dawned bright and clear. Mina and I had lunch at an Italian restaurant near her apartment. Afterwards, we strolled along the shopping street, enjoying some window shopping. Being a weekend, the sidewalk was crowded with families and couples. As my eyes wandered to a young woman in a miniskirt approaching from the opposite direction, I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my side. "Ouch!" I cried out, instinctively looking down at my left flank. What I saw made me gasp. Mina, walking beside me, was jabbing me with what appeared to be a screwdriver. "What are you doing? Stop it!" I shouted, pushing her shoulder forcefully. Mina stumbled, and when I saw her face, I felt a chill run through my body. She was smiling that same eerie smile, her eyes dead and lifeless. Those eyes, they reminded me of something. Suddenly, a vivid memory flashed in my mind. It was from the night I first met Mina on that old bridge. She had been leaning against the railing, repeatedly reaching into a burlap sack with her right hand and throwing something into the river. At the time, I thought I had seen gloves, but now I realized, no, those weren't gloves. They were. My knees began to tremble uncontrollably. Mina stood there, screwdriver in hand, still wearing that unsettling smile. Without a second thought, I turned and ran as fast as I could down the sidewalk, leaving Mina behind. As I ran, my mind raced with horrifying possibilities. What had I gotten myself involved in? Who or what was Mina really? And what about that grotesque figure I had seen in her apartment? The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, forming a picture too terrifying to contemplate. But one thing was certain: I needed to get as far away from Mina as possible. As I ran, I could feel her dead fish eyes boring into my back. Her eerie smile etched into my memory. I didn't know where I was running to, but I knew I couldn't stop. Not now, not ever. Because if I did, I might end up like that poor soul in Mina's room, or worse, at the bottom of the river, piece by piece. And so, dear viewers, I leave you with this chilling tale. Remember, not all is as it seems, and sometimes, the most terrifying monsters wear the most innocent faces. Sleep well tonight, if you can, and always, always trust your instincts. Until next time, goodbye, and sweet dreams. Craving more terror? Brace yourself for our next spine-tingling story. A cursed artifact, a vengeful spirit. What horrors await? Ladies and gentlemen, gather round as I share with you a chilling tale from my high school days in Japan. It was a sweltering summer during my second year, when my friends and I decided to embark on a thrilling adventure. Now, before we dive into this spine-tingling story, let me paint you a picture of Japan's unique summer atmosphere. The air is thick with humidity, cicadas sing their relentless songs, and there's a certain magic in the air that makes even the most ordinary events feel extraordinary. Our group consisted of 4 teenage boys, each with our own quirks and personalities. There was the bold and brash leader, the quiet observer, the nervous but determined follower, and myself, the one who suggested this hair-raising expedition in the first place. Our destination? An abandoned village nestled in the mountains, just a 20-minute bus ride from our hometown. At the heart of this deserted hamlet stood an old folk house, once a quaint inn, but now a crumbling remnant of the past. We had stumbled upon this information while browsing the internet, as curious teenagers are wont to do. The inn, we learned, had been renovated and operated as a lodging facility long before it was abandoned. However, as the local population dwindled, so did its patrons, until finally, it joined the ranks of Japan's countless haikyo or abandoned places. But we weren't interested in the history or architecture of the place. No, our goal was far more thrilling and, in hindsight, perhaps a bit foolish. We were there for a test of courage, a komodameshi as it's called in Japanese. Now, for those unfamiliar with this concept, a komodameshi is a popular summer activity in Japan, especially among young people. It involves visiting a supposedly haunted location at night to test one's bravery. It's a mix of fun and fear, a way to bond with friends while getting your heart racing. As we made our plans, we faced one significant hurdle: transportation. Being underage, none of us had a driver's license. This meant relying on public buses, which limited our options considerably. The last bus back to town would leave around 11 p.m., far too early for our nocturnal adventure. So, we hatched a plan. We would tell our parents we were staying at a friend's house, a white lie that would allow us to spend the night in the abandoned village. It was a risky move, but the allure of the unknown was too strong to resist. The day of our adventure arrived, and we boarded the bus with backpacks full of snacks and supplies. It might have seemed excessive for a single night's outing, but there was an unspoken nervousness among us, manifesting in over-preparation. As we settled into our seats, I couldn't help but notice the curious glances from other passengers. Their eyes seemed to ask, "What are these young boys up to?" Little did they know the heart-pounding experience that awaited us. The bus journey itself was uneventful, but as we neared our destination, the atmosphere began to change. The bustling town gave way to sparsely populated areas, and soon we found ourselves surrounded by looming mountains and dense forests. When we finally disembarked, I noticed something peculiar. The bus driver opened his mouth as if to say something, then seemed to think better of it. He gave us a long, questioning look before closing the doors and driving away. Standing there in the fading light, we found ourselves at the edge of a small, old-fashioned street. Traditional Japanese houses, their wooden structures, weathered by time, lined the road. The street lamps were few and far between, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out like grasping fingers. We pressed on, following a narrower, more weathered road that led towards the mountains. With each step, the modern world seemed to slip away, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the crunch of gravel under our feet. As we walked, the mountains loomed closer, their silhouettes dominating the skyline. The paved road gradually gave way to a path overgrown with weeds, blurring the line between civilization and wilderness. It felt as if we were crossing some invisible boundary, stepping into a realm where the normal rules no longer applied. Suddenly, a high-pitched scream pierced the air, causing us all to freeze in our tracks. "What was that?" one of my friends whispered, his voice trembling. "Relax, it's just a deer," our self-appointed leader replied, trying to sound nonchalant despite the slight quiver in his voice. I couldn't help but chuckle nervously. The contrast between the cute deer I'd seen in videos and this blood-curdling sound was stark. It was a reminder that nature, for all its beauty, could also be wild and unpredictable. We continued our journey, trying to lighten the mood by chatting about everyday things, the latest viral videos, popular TV shows, anything to distract us from the growing unease. But as we walked, the vegetation began to thin out, and an open area came into view. Instinctively, we all pointed our flashlights forward, revealing a sight that made our hearts skip a beat. There, scattered before us, were several abandoned houses, the remnants of what was once a thriving village. One of my friends pulled out his smartphone, suggesting we take a commemorative photo. The rest of us lined up, trying to look cheerful despite the eerie backdrop. As the camera flash lit up the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. After the impromptu photo shoot, we decided to explore one of the nearby houses. It was a modest two-story building, its exterior walls crumbling and windows shattered. It was clear that we weren't the first curious visitors. Signs of vandalism were evident. Peering through a broken window, we could see shards of glass and debris littering the floor. The sight was more depressing than frightening, a stark reminder of the passage of time and the fragility of human habitation. While most of us were content to observe from outside, our brave leader ventured inside. We watched nervously as he rummaged through an old, exposed dresser, half expecting something to jump out at any moment. As we continued our exploration, we found that most of the houses were in a similar state of disrepair. Walls full of holes, interiors cluttered with garbage, some even defaced with graffiti. It was a sobering sight, far removed from the romantic notion of abandoned places, often portrayed in movies and books. According to our research, the closed inn, our main destination, was located on higher ground beyond the village. We made our way there, alternating between observing the decaying houses and navigating the overgrown path. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes, we caught sight of our goal. The old folk house stood before us, its silhouette looming against the night sky. The building was larger than I had imagined, more akin to a small community center than a quaint country inn. Its exterior showed signs of attempted modernization, with a contemporary entrance grafted onto the traditional Japanese architecture. However, time had not been kind to these improvements. Ivy and moss crawled over the walls, nature slowly reclaiming what man had built. As we approached the entrance, we saw that the circular door handle was wrapped with a chain. However, the chain had been cut, likely by previous adventurers like ourselves, and now lay uselessly on the ground. We hesitated for a moment, the reality of what we were about to do finally sinking in. But curiosity and the desire to prove our bravery won out, and we stepped into the darkness of the abandoned inn. The moment we crossed the threshold, a chill ran down my spine. The air inside was noticeably cooler than outside, and there was a heaviness to it that seemed to press down on us. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing a spacious lobby that had once welcomed weary travelers. "It's bigger than I thought," one of my friends whispered, his voice echoing slightly in the empty space. We made our way past the remnants of what must have been a comfortable seating area, overturned long chairs and the skeletal remains of potted plants. Our destination was the reception counter at the far end of the lobby. Behind the counter, we found a small work area for the staff. Desks were strewn with scattered papers and file cases, and dust-covered stationery lay haphazardly about. In one corner stood a safe, its door hanging open, evidence of a forced entry long ago. As we explored, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were disturbing something. It wasn't just the physical space we were intruding upon, but something less tangible, memories, perhaps, or echoes of the lives that had once filled this place. We regrouped in the lobby to plan our next move. One friend suggested we explore the first floor thoroughly, while another proposed we do a quick circuit of both floors, starting from the left and working our way up and around. After a brief discussion, we decided on the latter plan. It seemed more efficient, and if I'm honest, none of us were keen on spending more time in this place than necessary. As we set off down the hallway, I couldn't help but notice the contrast between the renovated areas and the original structure. The lobby and reception area had been modernized, but as we moved deeper into the building, we found ourselves surrounded by traditional Japanese architecture. The wooden floors creaked ominously under our feet, and the air grew thicker with dust and the musty scent of abandonment. Our flashlights cast long, dancing shadows on the walls, transforming innocent objects into monstrous shapes. Our first stop was a large banquet hall adjacent to the lobby. As we slid open the Fusuma doors, we were greeted by a vast tatami room that could easily accommodate 100 people. Beyond the room, separated by shoji screens, we could make out what must have once been a beautiful garden. Now, however, nature had reclaimed its territory. The garden was an untamed wilderness, the carefully manicured plants of the past long since overrun by weeds and wild growth. The sight was both beautiful and melancholic, a vivid illustration of the transient nature of human endeavors. Across the hall, we found what appeared to be a staff room. Simple folding tables and pipe chairs were arranged haphazardly, and lockers lined the walls. A torn two-seater sofa sat forlornly in one corner. Must be where the employees hung out, one of my friends mused. We moved on, exploring a series of utility rooms, a serving area, a kitchen, and restrooms. Each space was covered in a thick layer of grime and dust, making them more repulsive than frightening. The bathrooms, however, with their dark, mold-covered tiles and broken mirrors, held a particularly sinister atmosphere. As we reached the end of the hallway, we found ourselves facing a staircase leading to the second floor. The wood looked rotten in places, and I couldn't help but wonder if it would support our weight. Taking a deep breath, we began our ascent, wincing at every creak and groan of the old wood. The air on the second floor felt even heavier, the darkness more oppressive. Unlike the first floor, the second was primarily composed of guest rooms. Sliding doors lined the hallway at regular intervals, some hanging off their tracks, others slightly ajar as if inviting us to peek inside. We approached the nearest door, sliding it open with trepidation. The room beyond was a traditional Japanese style chamber of about 10 tatami mats in size. As my flashlight swept across the room, something by the window caught my eye, and I let out an involuntary gasp. There, illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the window, was a human-shaped shadow suspended in mid-air. "What's wrong?" my friends asked, turning to me in alarm. I blinked, and the apparition was gone. "Nothing," I lied, not wanting to frighten the others. just a spider web. We continued our exploration, but I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me. As we examined the fusuma of a closet, punctured as if someone had punched through it, I thought I saw something blink within. But when I looked closer, there was nothing there. I began to doubt my own eyes. Was it just my imagination playing tricks on me? Or was there something more sinister at work in this abandoned inn? As we moved down the hallway, our leader suddenly stopped at a window, shining his light outside. "There's nothing here," he said, a hint of disappointment in his voice. "Nothing's happening." But just as he finished speaking, he let out a startled yell and leapt into the hallway. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice echoing in the empty building. We all froze, looking at each other in confusion and fear. "Did you see someone?" I asked, my heart pounding. Our leader stood there, his flashlight beam dancing erratically as his hand shook. I thought I saw a shadow pass by," he said, his voice uncharacteristically small. We huddled together, our eyes straining to see into the darkness beyond our light beams. The silence was oppressive, broken only by our rapid breathing. Let's keep going," one of my friends suggested, his voice trembling slightly. We moved on, but the atmosphere had changed. The playful excitement of our adventure had been replaced by a palpable sense of dread. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of wind through the broken windows, sent shivers down our spines. As we approached the next room, we decided to use rock, paper, scissors to determine who would open the door. The unlucky loser was my quietest friend. With visible reluctance, he slid the door open and stepped inside. The moment he entered, a blood-curdling scream erupted from his throat. We all jumped back, our hearts racing. My flashlight beam caught sight of a figure in the center of the room. A middle-aged man dressed all in white, his body slightly overweight. More screams followed as we all saw the apparition. Without thinking, I grabbed my friend's shoulder and yanked him out of the room. We all turned and ran, our feet pounding against the old wood of the hallway. We didn't stop until we reached the central area of the second floor, an open space that overlooked the lobby below. Panting heavily, we looked at each other with wide, frightened eyes. Did you all see that?" our leader asked, his usual bravado completely gone. We nodded silently, too shocked to speak. The figure we had seen was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just a shadow or a trick of the light. It had been solid, real, undeniably there. "What do we do now?" one of my friends asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, we heard a sound that made our blood run cold. Ho 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 ho. It was a laugh, but not one of mirth or joy. It was a hollow, echoing sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Our leader pointed his flashlight down the hallway we had just fled from. There, at the far end, was a figure. It was the man in white, but now he was moving towards us. His arms were spread wide, and his face was shaking from side to side at an impossible speed. "Run!" someone shouted, and we didn't need to be told twice. We bolted down the stairs, our feet barely touching the steps. The wood groaned and creaked alarmingly beneath us, but we were too terrified to care about the risk of falling through. As we reached the first floor, our leader made a split-second decision and darted through a large entrance covered by a Nerian curtain. Like ducklings following their mother, we all rushed after him. We found ourselves in a changing room, and beyond that, the inn's bathhouse. "It's a dead end," our leader cursed, looking around frantically. The bathhouse was surprisingly large, with multiple washing stations arranged in rows. In any other circumstance, it might have been interesting to see this relic of communal bathing culture. But right now, all I could think about was finding a place to hide. We crouched down behind the washing stations, our breath coming in short, panicked gasps. From the hallway, we could hear the distinctive laugh getting closer. Ho 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 ho. We held our breath as the sound of footsteps entered the changing room. The laugh stopped, replaced by the sound of someone sniffing the air. For what felt like an eternity, we remained motionless, hardly daring to breathe. Then, slowly, the footsteps receded, and the laughter faded into the distance. Our leader cautiously stood up. "I'm going to check if it's gone," he whispered, his voice barely audible. We watched with bated breath as he tiptoed towards the changing room. The silence was deafening, broken only by the rapid beating of our hearts. Suddenly, he came rushing back, his face pale with fear. "It's coming back," he hissed. "We need to get out of here." Without hesitation, we scrambled to our feet and made a mad dash for the exit. As we burst out of the bathhouse, I caught a glimpse of white in my peripheral vision, accompanied by that chilling laugh. We ran through the lobby and out into the cool night air, not daring to look back. Our feet pounded against the overgrown path as we headed back towards the abandoned village. It wasn't until we reached the outskirts of the village that we finally slowed down, gasping for air. We huddled together, our eyes darting around nervously. "Is everyone okay?" I managed to ask between breaths. Before anyone could answer, our leader let out a strangled cry. Following his gaze, we saw something that made our blood run cold. There, in the second floor window of one of the abandoned houses, was the white-clad figure. It was smiling at us, a wide, unnatural grin that seemed to split its face in two. We didn't need any more encouragement. We took off running again, leaving behind our water bottles and any pretense of bravery. We ran through the abandoned village, past the old houses, and down the mountain path. The sound of our footsteps and panicked breathing seemed to echo in the night air. It wasn't until we reached the main road, with streetlights and the distant hum of civilization, that we finally stopped. We collapsed onto the ground, our legs shaking from exhaustion and fear. As we caught our breath, we looked at each other, unable to fully process what had just happened. The local convenience store's neon sign glowed in the distance, a beacon of normalcy in what had been a night of terror. It was past 3 a.m. when we finally made it to my friend's house, the closest to where we were. We rang the doorbell, waking up his parents, who were understandably upset and worried. As we settled into my friend's room for what remained of the night, sleep was the last thing on our minds. We sat in a circle, still trembling, slightly, trying to make sense of our experience. What was that thing?" one of my friends asked, breaking the silence. None of us had an answer. We recounted what we had seen, each retelling, sending fresh shivers down our spines. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the window, we made a solemn pact. We would never speak of this night to anyone else, and we would never, ever return to that place. But there was one detail I kept to myself, one final horror that I couldn't bring myself to share with my friends. In that last terrifying moment, when we saw the figure in the village house, I noticed something that still haunts my nightmares to this day. The smiling face that looked down at us from that second floor window. It had 4 eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, I share this story with you now, years later, as a cautionary tale. The thrill of exploring abandoned places may seem enticing, but sometimes, the past is best left undisturbed. For in the shadows of forgotten places, who knows what might be waiting, watching, and laughing that bone-chilling laugh. Ho 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 ho. Even now, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, that laughter echoing in my ears, and I wonder, did we really escape that night? Or did something follow us back? Something that's still out there, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? I'll leave you with this final thought: the next time you pass by an abandoned building, or a deserted village, and feel the urge to explore, remember our story. Some doors, once opened, can never be truly closed again. And some mysteries, once encountered, will haunt you for the rest of your days. Thank you for listening to my tale. Pleasant dreams, everyone, and may you never hear that laugh in the dark of night.